to share our stories with President Hensel and with Chancellor Peñaloza, who will soon be your interim chancellor on January 1st. I'll wait for everybody to come and sit down. This is the first campus forum for all of us, and for everyone online. Welcome once again. I would like to welcome Moani Navarro, who will be your facilitator today.
Kalamai, mahalo nui, Chancellor, for that beautiful welcome on this Ainan, and we truly appreciate your aloha and extension of malama for us. Mahalo nui. Yes, thank you so much for having us. You know, I'm so humbled to be joined by two very thoughtful leaders to have a collaborative discussion together, as Chancellor Benham mentioned, as Chancellor Peñaloza prepares to step into the interim chancellor role here at Ke Kulanui o Hawaiʻi Oʻahu Komohana, UH West Oʻahu. Just to kind of set the tone for our kama'ilio, our conversation today, the thought behind the forum is really about coming together to speak openly about the evolving collaboration between UH West Oʻahu and Leeward Community College. And we understand that there are a lot of questions, likely emotions, maybe some anxiety about this next chapter and truly what it means. And that's what today is all about. We are here to listen together, to share ideas, and truly imagine, you know, what is possible in this ever-evolving chapter of higher ed. And so before we begin, we just want to formally welcome, if everyone could pa'i lima kako, and welcome UH President Wendy Hensel. As well as pa'i lima kako for Chancellor Peñaloza. And of course, we have such a healthy turnout for our in-person forum, but we also have viewers that are joining us online via Zoom. And so we will get to the Q&A portion of the forum. For those of you joining online, if you do have any questions that pop up during our presentations, that'll come up momentarily, we just ask you to enter those questions using the Q&A function in Zoom. And then for our in-person audience, when we get to the Q&A portion, we just kindly ask you to raise your hand, and then we will bring a microphone over to you so you can share your mana'o with us. But before we get there, we'd like to take a moment. I know that President Hensel and Chancellor Peñaloza, you did want to share just some topics and guidelines to help shape the conversation today. And President, we'll start off with you. You know, we mentioned earlier, we just came from Leeward CC that I believe West Oʻahu was the first campus that you started at when you did the campus by campus visit and collaborative talks. But share with us, because it appears that transparency and collaboration is something that is close to your heart.
I think it's critically important that whenever we have, we do a lot of important work, and a lot of people care about what we do. And that means that we have to do it in a way that people understand what we're doing, they're involved in what we're doing, and they get to have a say in what we're doing. And so today is just a chance to begin the conversation. And if I could take one moment, Moani, I appreciate the warm welcome and the applause this morning. But I think we forgot one person who we need to applaud for. You know, as we're talking about the future of West Oʻahu, we should never forget the folks who built it to where it is today. And Chancellor Benham is a treasure here and will be missed. And as we talk about where we're headed, let's not forget who got us here. So will you please join me in thanking Chancellor Benham? So next slide, please. You may see me turn around because I'm not sure where they are. See, I've been talking a lot about this since I came. You know, we did start with coming to campus, speaking to lots of constituents, talking to you, and just really listening about what's working, what's not, what you're excited about, where the opportunities are for growth for this campus and across the system. And that conversation has led to many different questions about how do we create a structure of a 10 campus system that facilitates the strategies that lead us in the direction that we want to go, that align incentives and accountability that will take us to the place that will best reinforce UH's mission and vision in the future, and really help serve our constituencies effectively. And so this conversation is not the only one taking place. I'm sure many of you, or at least some of you, heard the Board of Regents conversation, and I'll just show a few slides that come from there to put it a little bit in context. Next slide, please. I have to advance my own, right? Are you guys in the room? We're not foolish enough not to use your own pictures. So what's the most important thing to take out of today? Two things, I think. One is the why and one is the how, right? And starting with the why, what I want to be really, really, really clear about, because I think this is where some of the anxiety comes in. This is not a conversation that is mandated by our fiscal situation. This is not a conversation to save money. It's great if it ends up there. It would be lovely if that is the outcome anytime we do something. But this conversation is about effectiveness. How do we really do what we want to do for our students effectively, and really deliver on the mission of the university? And so, I think it's easy to conflate things that are happening right now. You hear a lot of conversations about our friends on the continent who are laying people off, who have massive financial structural deficits. And this is different than that. We are financially sound at this moment. I want to say that really clearly. Yes, there are definitely impacts from the federal decisions. We are just, looking through lots of grant terminations and trying to evaluate how do we preserve the core mission and the important services that are being developed. But this conversation is separate from that. So it really is about the positive side of change as opposed to requiring us to move in this direction, which is a positive. It's got to be there somewhere, right? So the words up here that I want to stress, because I get it. It is really important to me. It has been throughout my career. And I hope that I've demonstrated that to you in the first 10 months. Where we go together based on what we want to do as a community, based on your voices, your ideas, and your energy. And so the only thing that has been determined at this point is that Carlos is the right person to lead this conversation as the interim chancellor. Literally every other thing that we will talk about is just that. It is a conversation. We may get to certain conversations, we may not, depending on how the community feels about it. We will be beginning, and we are truly at the preliminary point of this, purposefully so. Carlos and I both agreed that we didn't want to get very far down in the thinking of how we would have these conversations until we talk to you first to even be part of that stage one of the journey. So we are here tonight to really begin telling you about what's possible, some of the things we might want to encounter, and why we're doing it. How do we take this vibrant, beautiful campus and take it to the next level by combining resources and programs and alignments and opportunities that may be out there that are not capable of being accessed at this moment in separate ways as effectively together. And if at the end of this conversation, the conclusion is that some of those things are true and others aren't, that's where we'll end it. So there is no predetermined conclusion, but the goal is to strengthen both campuses. Next slide, please. Yeah. So I just show you this quickly because this is something I went through at the Regents, but there really are significant benefits to think through how we operate across the 10 and have closer collaboration across these two. And overwhelmingly, it comes on the academic side of identifying how do we take students who are so closely situated to each other and make their journey seamless. So many of the bureaucracies that we have in large organizations are from products of choices that we've made, and that didn't necessarily address problems that we are encountering now. And so asking, how do we, for example, is there perhaps a place where maybe there's dual admission? so that when you're admitted to a particular degree program, there's no transfer that's necessary, even if you begin at Leeward and continue. I've seen those kind of programs. Are there small programs at both that may not have sufficient resources individually, but who coming together could create a much more robust program? So lots of conversations in that regard. And also a phenomena that I typically refer to as 10,000 points of light. Those of you who are older will know where that comes from, and then younger ones will think I made it up. So just go with me on this one. But there are tremendous pockets of excellence across this campus and Leeward. Lots of innovation, lots of great stuff happening. But when it's in 10,000 places, the impact of that is hard to move the actual needle in terms of student outcomes. And so are there places where if we strategically aligned around a few things that we thought would really move the needle for our students, can we move in that direction? That kind of alignment can really make a difference. Also, I hope you've heard me talk about something that we're going to talk a lot about going forward, and that's creating a common standard of care for every student at the University of Hawaii, and also to a place where we can start talking about that for faculty and staff as well. If you are a student here, if you are a faculty member at one of our, or staff at one of our 10 campuses, there should not be wildly uneven resource distribution and workload between you. You know, it shouldn't matter if you're sitting at Leeward or on Kauai or at Manoa or at UH West Oʻahu. You're our student, and it is our job to create a level of resources that allow you to reach your goal. I think I've said this publicly in this room before, but I'll say it again. I think UH West Oʻahu is under-resourced, and that's a problem. We need to, part of the challenge of being a vibrant campus is not having resources to be able to move innovation in spaces that we want to go. So I want to assure you that as we walk through this space together, it's not about taking something away from you. It's not about taking half a chancellor from you and giving you half a Carlos. We have had conversations about there will need to be resource allocations coming into this campus, both from an administrative perspective and as we have these conversations to really ask, where can we go if we are not bound by the current structure and the current limitations that we're facing? That's a complicated conversation. Just had a budget conversation with Manoa where we explained our budget, our meaning all of ours across the 10 campuses, is allocated by campus, right? The community colleges get an allocation, you get an allocation, Hilo gets an allocation, and Manoa has 3 or 4 different allocations. And nowhere is that allocation based on a premise of a common standard of care across our students. Then once it comes into the campus, then it goes out and it ends up in having pretty, some campuses are clear winners under that structure and some are not. And Chancellor Benham knows, I think you all are on the side of not getting the attention that you need to, in part because we are not working sufficiently as a system. Community colleges have 7, then there's you, there's Hilo, and then there's a very large R1. So we have to work on all of these things. And one place we really see a lot of opportunity is this kind of synergy between 2 campuses very close together to look at what's possible. So give you just a quick example of some of the areas where I think we can look and why we may want to. This is not unique to UH West Oʻahu and Leeward, but enrollment is seen as a zero-sum game across our 10 campuses. Yours goes up, and that is a win. Someone else's goes down in the same system, and that's a problem. That's their problem, right? But if you look at enrollment patterns, everything every one of our campuses does affects the others in terms of scholarships that are offered, in terms of incentives and lower tuition costs. And I think a great example is Manoa goes up as they lower their price through tuition discounts. Whose enrollment went down? Yours did. Kapiolani's did. You got in the same game that Manoa was doing with some of the scholarship decisions. Whose enrollment went down? Leeward. So, this is a place where if we are working together and see it more as raising accessibility across our system and coming up with common marketing, new programs, exciting innovation that really delineate who we are, it can make a big difference for all of us and actually alleviate some of that pressure. I've talked about uneven resource allocation. Mission creep is something I get pressured a lot about in the last 10 months by legislators who feel strongly that every campus should have every degree, right? Including community colleges having bachelor's degree. At Leeward, that is a common refrain, that we should add this bachelor's degree. When are you going to do that? And my answer to that is we cannot replicate every program at every location. There's no point to having campuses this close in proximity that are not working collaboratively in terms of what's offered, right? And we're working through different strategies to do that, but it seems like this is the perfect place to begin that conversation of really how do we leverage the synergies that already exist between these two campuses. And then finally, I'll just say stagnation happens and because it's hard to make change. Either you don't have the resources or the bureaucracy is too hard. And just look at our issues with transfer. Transfer is something that affects every student on our campus. And instead of getting closer to resolution, our numbers are declining for intra-transfer. And let me compliment those of you in this room. You all have been the leaders in transfer. So I know Chancellor Benham has done great work on that, but we're still not to the point where a student who goes from one campus to the next doesn't have to ask the question, did some of the classes I take mean nothing at this point, right? We need to address that as a moral issue, not just as an academic issue. So we're moving toward that. And then again, I just put this up here again because it's important and I want you to hold us to it. We believe it, we mean it. There are no predetermined outcomes. This will go as fast as you're comfortable with. It will go as slow as you're comfortable with. And as we explore and hopefully we get excited about the possibilities, that will lead to additional conversations between our campuses and across silos that typically are not engaging with each other in a regular way. And then finally, just to assure you, well, that's what I'm saying. We're going to do this in the right way. It will involve consultation across faculty governance, staff governance, students will be involved in this, community members. I've already spoken. That's right, you're up there again. Find yourself in the picture. See, we're all friends. And we will continue to be so. We're going to continue to have those conversations because they're important. Last thing I'm going to address is some people have said, well, what's my role, my personal role as the president? I am here to be your advocate and to be the advocate of the system. I know some people in the room may be worried because Carlos is currently the chancellor at Leeward. Does he lean in that direction as we work through this? What I can tell you is if I thought that for a second, I would never have asked Carlos to step in this position. That's just not who Carlos is. But even if it were, even if being a human being means you know more about Leeward and less about UH Oʻahu, I'll be in this process too to be your advocate. We will have direct lines of communication throughout. And as I said to the staff here and administration, we will be talking about what you need to make this successful throughout the process of the conversation. So this is not about losing resources. It really is hopefully about gaining them and some momentum to reach goals that we're excited about. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Carlos or to Wendy.
Right. So President Hensel, I think first off, just thank you so much for that approachable insight and perspective. And I think if you've met President Hensel in the past, it truly is very engaging to listen to your perspective because it really feels like it's an open, collaborative discussion. And turning now to Chancellor Peñaloza, you've been deeply involved in creating new pathways for student success and building bridges between campuses. We'd love to hear from you about your vision and just more about who you are and your background as well.
Well, thank you for that. I always struggle when I'm second after someone like President Hensel and sharing some thoughts, but aloha everyone. I will share this much. I wanted to introduce myself in a different way to West Oʻahu. And many of you may know me already in some capacity, but I think that it's important to reinforce a little bit of who I am, the human Carlos. Um, I had a very interesting beginning. Some of you may know that I'm originally from Venezuela, and I came to the U.S. by way of New York, where I went through my entire post-secondary education. And I am a very proud community college graduate. That's where I started. English as a second language and lacking financial resources, a community college opened the way for me. But through that pathway, I was able to, within a system, earn my bachelor's, master's, and PhD in biology. And I say that I'm a very proud product of a public higher ed system. But I will also say that I reflect a lot on those who are my friends at my community college, my friends earning a bachelor's with me and beyond. And I will tell you that not everyone had the best of experience. I will tell you that for every 5 of us that may have started in a pathway, by the time we ended in the next place, there may have been just one of us. I was supported by my faculty and my advisors and my friends. And so I have nothing but great things to say. But as I engaged in higher education and I became a faculty member, I was really intrigued in as to why it was that not everyone could share that same experience. Right? And not everyone was guided in the same capacity, and not everyone felt that they were advised accordingly so that it could be a stackable pathway to great credentials. Additionally, my mother never went to college. I didn't have a great deal of support in that space. And so I relied a lot on my professors. I relied a lot on the people that were in my immediate surroundings. And I will tell you that up until very recently, one of my typical letters of recommendations that I would request for almost anything was my organic chemistry professor from my community college, who I think put me in the right pathway and was always someone that I went to for advice. Academically, I feel that I've achieved a lot that I'm proud of, and yet I am no longer doing much biology. I did that for some years. I loved what I did, and I decided to refocus a little bit because of an observation I made during an accreditation cycle where I was tasked to do some assessment. And that observation was that there were very many of us that started on, I would call, a pre-med track, and very few of us that made it to that next year. Not even into medical school. I'm talking about the next year. And what could we do at that point? And so, like many faculty, I wrote some grants to support some of our students that were going down that path. And slowly but surely, I made it into administrative positions. I was chair, dean, and beyond, and worked really, to the best of my ability to support our students making that progress. That has been my academic and professional pathway. You may have learned that I started in New York, went to the Midwest, and now here in Hawaii. And that was in part because of who I am and who my family is. I am happily married. My wife and I have 4 great children. Their ages 10 through 14. They represent who we are. And they are why we make the decisions that we make. And part of my professional pathway has been designed because I want them to have a great experience, and I want them to be proud of who we are. Over the years, and I say this way too many times, maybe you know this already, but over the years, we lived in many different places, but it wasn't until a couple of years ago here in Hawaii where I felt that we actually finally had a home. And it happened during a spring break when all of the neighborhood kids came to our house. And we were the auntie and uncle for our community. And we finally, it was like one of those moments where we paused and said, wow, we have a home. And so we are committed to who we are here. We are committed to community. You'll find us engaging in many different community events. The Leeward folks know this. You may not know this, but I engage in taiko drums and I will perform at community events. And I love it, not because I want to spend my weekend doing something that, will make my shoulders sore, but because I'm with the community. We are with the community and embracing who we are. And so that's a little bit more about myself. And I will say that my commitment to UH West Oʻahu is a commitment to building pathways for our students to feel and see that they have a clear pathway for them to not be those students that attrit. I'm going to give you an example that I share a lot. When you're a high school student in the 9th grade, the 10th grade is just natural. It's not necessarily a moment to stop out. The 12th grade is an absolute moment to stop out, right? Whether you go to college or not is a decision that you need to make. Leeward Community College has many, many students that want to earn a bachelor's degree and beyond. But any instance that they have, I've earned a credential and now I have to apply for another one, we've all been students. We know what rejection may feel like. Our students may feel that they won't even bother applying because they will be rejected from their next academic venture. We want to be able to make this a smooth effort for them so that they can be successful. And so it's a net gain overall and not necessarily removing anything. You may be hearing things about a dual mission institution. Well, the reality is, or a regional comprehensive institution, we can't give up the assets that either of us have because they've been created and developed because we are delivering our missions. And so when we look at non-credit workforce development, or when we're looking at pre-collegiate classes, when we're looking at certificates, associates, and baccalaureate degrees, it's the entire gamut that we have to invest in and not reducing in any of those. But can we make that pathway seamless for our students from Leeward to West Oʻahu? And in doing that, also clear up the path for all of the other community college students to come to West Oʻahu? I think so. Because what we're trying to address is that student that has to make some decisions. I'm not following the slides too much, but can we move on to the next one? I'm sorry, apologies. The net gain is improving that student experience. With President Hensel joining the university, she commissioned a study to do a gap analysis for some programming that we have, especially online. I think that you all know this and will reinforce it, but both Leeward and West Oʻahu are champions in online education. And one of the challenges that we have in doing a gap analysis is that an outsider may not actually see the pathways that we actually have. Right? And so if we can't tell our own story of what we have within the system, then we have to find ways of addressing that because our students aren't seeing it either. They may be opting to go elsewhere because they don't think that there is a pathway here. And so I come to you, I am very humbled by the opportunity to come here to West Oʻahu, and I am committed to offering West Oʻahu my full attention. I'm often asked, how can someone wear two hats of an already very difficult and challenging job? Well, I'll tell you this much. I see the opportunities, but I also see the opportunities of embracing our existing leadership, our existing structures, and getting a lot of support from our own folks here at West Oʻahu and Leeward to help in the process. There's no way that any one chancellor can say that they've accomplished everything by themselves. It's a community. The college as a whole embraces it and we move forward. We are committed to bringing in resources and creating opportunities for faculty, staff, students, and everyone to engage in what this future may look like for us. And if all we get is a clearer pathway for our students to West Oʻahu, and that's it, it would still be an amazing win. And so I'm here today to introduce myself in that capacity and tell you that I am incredibly committed to both, and that in no way should you feel that Carlos is going to make UH West Oʻahu bend over backwards while Leeward does not move an inch. The reality is that we all have to move. I'll give you one example of that, and I think it's critical. With President Hensel's arrival to UH, we have looked at opportunities, and one of those gaps is how community college associate degrees have been developed. And over time, we've had applied degrees, or what were traditionally AAS degrees, converted to AS degrees, where the composition of the courses have not necessarily changed. It makes it really difficult to articulate. And so it's the net gain for everyone. We want to have the options available, but we want to also do it in a way in which it makes sense. And so with that, I'll give you back my time.
Mahalo nui, Carlos. And something that stuck with me at the beginning of your presentation, did we hear you're a taiko drummer? I feel like the next PowerPoint, we need to see you taiko drumming. That's awesome. Mahalo nui for sharing. And it really is a get to know you for those of us who, are just meeting you for the first time. From mahalo nui to Carlos. We're going to transition now to our Q&A portion of the forum. For those of you that are tuning in online, thank you again for being here on your Aloha Friday. If you do have questions, continue to enter that into the Q&A feature of the Zoom room. But we want to start off with our in-person audience. If you do have any questions or mana'o, if you can raise your hand, we'd love to hear from you. We want to get through as many questions as possible. Scanning the room. Any questions? Maybe not Makoko yet, but we do have quite a few that have been pre-submitted as well. So we'll get to that one first. And the first one reads, what does integration of the two campuses look like to you? Is it sharing of dollar resources? Is it sharing of physical locations? Or is it sharing of personnel?
I could get started. I think it's a little too early, but I will tell you that we already share most, if not all of those as a system. I will tell you that on the faculty side, we do share some faculty. I will tell you that we have shared services too at times where we capitalize on each other's strengths. In facilities as well, we have the capacity to engage in sharing facilities. From a short-term perspective, it could be working more of that into the equation. And from a long-term perspective, the integration piece to the question is really key. Eventually, it should be more natural. If you have been in a situation where you may be a West Oʻahu faculty member teaching at Leeward, you probably know how many signatures it takes to get that to happen. And integration reduces a lot of the bureaucracy and the red tape that allows for some of this to be a lot more easily achieved. And with our proximity, and I'm not going to ignore our Waianae Moku Education Center, with the proximity that we have, capitalizing on each other's spaces and resources can help. But like I said earlier, it's a little too early because we don't know where we're going to end up or what we would have to address at this juncture.
Thanks, Carlos. This next question coming in from our virtual audience, and it reads, please define what you mean by common standard of care for students. How will these standards be measured, according to what data and metrics, and according to what qualitative data as well? How will a common standard of care for students align with the mission and vision of each campus and/or accreditation standards? And there's continuance of the question as well. Will a standard of care address basic needs for students, multiple modes of delivery for classes and curricula, enrollment data, adequate student services resources?
Yeah, this is another one I want to know if AI is behind the question, because that's very, very comprehensive. Excellent question. It's the beginning of a conversation of actual data, right? I mean, graduation rates and retention rates shouldn't be wildly different across our campuses. If they are, the question is why? They shouldn't be wildly different across types of students, by race or gender or socioeconomic status. If they are, the question has to be why? And there really should not be wildly varying financial models that apply to our different campuses. If you talk to Chancellor Benham, I'm sure she'll tell you that she really hates paying debt service on this campus. It's very expensive, and it takes a significant amount out of the annual allocation from the legislature. Not all campuses do that. It's partly how these deals were structured at different times by different legislatures. So what that means, again, is should a student who's on the West Side have a different opportunity and a different experience altogether, not that's intentional, based on mission and offering different things to different people that help them make it work, but based on a lack of resources or intentionality. And I think, there's a long way to go. to get to the point where we can say definitively that there are no differences across our campuses in that regard. But I think it's, again, a moral obligation from my perspective that our student is our student is our student. And same with respect to our faculty and staff. So it's the beginning of a complicated but incredibly important conversation using data to drive outcomes.
Mahalo, President. And we're going to continue to scan the room here at UH West Oʻahu. And we do have our first in-person question. Mahalo nui. We'll have a mic come to you courtesy of our UH communications team. Mahalo.
Aloha, my name is Nale. I'm a student here at West Oʻahu. My question is, why do you feel like this collaboration is the best solution rather than other transfer efforts? So I worked for Kealoha this past summer, which was a collaboration with LCC helping students transfer over, and then maybe other like positions or things here at West Oʻahu to help students transition over rather than this.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll start and then you can go, Carlos, because this is something I really care a lot about. And the answer is it is not sufficient. We should be attempting to resolve the transfer issue on multiple fronts all at the same time. There are particular lessons to be learned from the close integration of these two campuses that might be exemplary in that regard. But I can tell you, for example, that this morning I kicked off a committee on general education with representatives from every campus, including this one. I had to still convince the folks on that call that there actually is an issue with transfer. Our students are suffering consequences from the lack of integrated abilities there. And once we're done, once we do that this year, which is really just to get to a place where we have fully articulated general education, we need to create a system for gen ed that continually evolves as new courses are introduced and asks the question, are we meeting the needs of our students? And then the third piece of that, which will be the biggest lift, but also the most important, I think, is total alignment within majors, right? So that it doesn't matter where you start. If you get your associate's degree in psychology, for example, if there was an AA or AS in psychology, that when you matriculate in one of our 4 years for the final 2 years, you matriculate with junior status. And I'm here to tell you that it's absolutely possible to do, but it requires people to begin to think of students at the center of the experience as opposed to turf wars and different disciplines in total honesty. I think everybody thinks they have the right answer, but if it really coalesces toward the students, we will get there. And I am absolutely committed that we will do everything we can on every front to solve this issue.
I'll add a little bit to the response too, and thank you for sharing your Kealoha experience. I will say that we both campuses, in fact, all of the UH campuses have a lot of really amazing initiatives, many of which, and here at West Oʻahu too, rely incredibly on extramural funds to sustain. And what we need to do is be able to articulate those best practices and find ways of institutionalizing them for that core benefit to our students. And so it's just finding opportunities to capitalize on that. What often happens is that as funds come through and they end, some of these activities and efforts also end with them. And so having that engaged opportunity and bridging the two campuses will more organically create that alignment and not necessarily fall into the opportunities that may come with grants or other programs.
One last thing, my dream world is where there are no articulation agreements, right? When you think about the amount of work that we put in to create articulations across different institutions, individually across the system in different areas that can be overturned or changed by individuals if not done correctly, it's an extraordinarily burdensome on the administrative side and completely unacceptable on the student side. Because even if they get that credit, they had to go through a process to get there and advocate and lobby for themselves. So we are moving toward, I really think, a much better place in this regard and look forward to that conversation.
Yes, mahalo nui for that question. And we now go to another pre-submitted one. Reading, it appears that under the proposed dual appointment, Interim Chancellor Peñaloza will be expected to fulfill in 2 days at UH West Oʻahu the responsibilities that Chancellor Benham currently performs over 5. How will Dr. Peñaloza effectively manage this significantly increased workload while also addressing the distinct missions, needs, and priorities of both campuses?
Have you said it's 2 days? Not said it's 2 days, but I'll let you answer that question. I'm sure you can.
I will share that, yes, I will make commitments to be present on both campuses, but in the net, I'm present on both campuses always. I will share that, I joke around about the use of rail, but at the same time, I don't. It does allow me to be on both campuses on the same day and be able to make meetings as necessary. Quite frankly, earlier this week on Monday, I started a meeting in Pearl City, came over to West Oʻahu on the rail and went right back to Pearl City. It does allow for that, but it also necessitates additional investments that both President Hensel and I are committing to it. And it really is a matter of helping empower some of the existing leadership on the campuses to help support some of this change. Like any of the decisions or programs or anything that we celebrate as the leadership of the colleges, very few of those are actually done by us. We support them, we lead, we guide, but it is the college that comes together that gets us to meeting those milestones that we celebrate. And so it is my commitment to be present and to make sure that I don't overlook or delay decisions that need to be made, but it will also be through additional resources that come to the table that will help me relieve a little bit some of my time commitments.
One thing I mentioned to the faculty senate when I met with them, and also to the administration, I will continue to be actively involved. So to the extent that the constituency here is feeling like you are not getting what you need to get, there will be continuous opportunities to provide that feedback, and a commitment from me to ensure that there is a response to that makes sure that our students in this location and you as faculty and staff are supported to the level that you need to be.
And we just want to mahalo everyone again for being open to sharing your mana'o and sharing with us your questions. We do have a question coming in from Zoom, but I just wanted to offer the opportunity again, if anyone in our in-person audience has any ninau, we have one there in the back. Mahalo.
Oh, hi, thanks. Hi, Stan Orr here, Senate Chair. President Hensel, I wanted to thank you for your initial comment about how this initiative is framed by creating more opportunities for students rather than some kind of austerity measure or something like that. I did read an article that suggested that dual mission institution efforts that are framed that way tend to succeed better than the kind that are framed around austerity. And so this might be the first time of many instances in which you hear different iterations of this, but could we maybe get an assurance that, dare we say even, could we get precluded that there will be any reductions in force associated with this DMI exploration? I was walking in with one of my longtime colleagues and we both agreed the whole process might be less tension fraught if we could get some assurances, because if you look at that Vermont model that was mentioned in your report, that was 33 faculty and 10 programs were on the chopping block, and they had to give a bunch of early retirement incentives and buyouts and things like that. So I think everybody would breathe a little easier if we could start to get some sort of just assurance that we're going to take that kind of thing off the table.
Yeah, in fact, I said that at the last forum, Stan. So I'm glad you asked the question directly. This has absolutely nothing to do with a reduction in force, and I do not expect that to happen. I'm sure everyone in this room might ask the question, how many hats are you wearing now? So if we reduce 5 of you, did we lose 10 positions all at the same time? We're somewhere around a 30% perennial understaffed percentage. So, there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of helping us get to the point where we're doing the impactful work and not just treading water every day with the stuff that we have to do. I will say, and just because I want to be completely candid about this, of course, we're in a moment when higher ed is changing really fast. We do have to ask hard questions across the system, outside of this process of how are we delivering our programs? How do we make it financially sustainable? And how do we meet the workforce needs of tomorrow? So, those are good conversations to have, but none of this, absolute truth from my perspective, the region's perspective, none of this is led by a thought of reduced staffing or like I said, getting to a place where there's considerably lower costs. I think if we do it right, conceivably, it could cost more. That's possible.
Mahalo for that question. And we turn now to a question coming in from Zoom. It reads, over the past several years, there has been a growing emphasis on short-term workforce training and the attainment of micro-credentials to help students gain the knowledge and skills needed to enter the workforce more quickly and affordably. How do you envision the regional comprehensive college concept supporting the expansion of non-credit education and training opportunities?
Great question. I will say, and you may already be familiar, at the community colleges, we have our workforce non-credit space where a lot of our opportunities and offering, and quite frankly, an area of rapid change for us where we can pivot and address needs very quickly exists. It's very big. In fact, for just Leeward Community College, we're speaking of anywhere between 1,600 to 2,000 students a year that enter our workforce non-credit space. And it's anything from an allied health certificate right down to something where, maybe some skills that are necessary for some jobs. And the example that I'll share, we have been engaged at Leeward with, say, the Department of Agriculture and other employers in agriculture for some time, in trying to understand the vacancies and the needs in the workforce, and then also how education could partner with them. And there is a need for individuals with both a baccalaureate degree and the right skills. And we have been entering into agreements where we'll take individuals with baccalaureates in almost any field and complement them with the skills that are necessary so that they can enter the workforce. Those are some examples. But I will also say that lifelong learning is a real thing. And so whether it is in teacher education, whether it is for our accountants, there are needs for CEU credits or whatever they may be. We have the model in place at the community colleges. A regional comprehensive could only gain from it simply because it is for everyone to benefit from. We could deliver them very quickly. We could deliver them through the systems that we already have. And the last bit that I will share from just a pipeline opportunity is we have many students that start in our non-force, in our non-credit workforce space. We have an opportunity to bring them into the credit space to complete a baccalaureate. And so it's a pipeline opportunity that would be absolutely available in a regional comprehensive space.
I add one additional piece that sort of fits with the question, but I always like to bring up, HPU is now doing 3-year degrees. They just announced it. And that's the kind of thing that doesn't fit in a community college or a 4-year. And so those are the kind of thing that may be opportunities, again, to ask, do these formats, which were invented 400 years ago to meet needs that are totally distinct from what we have now, take us where we want to go next, or where we must go given the pace of change with AI and the speed of turnover in terms of workforce needs. I also think if we can do effectively what Carlos just outlined about that pipeline of build at whatever skill set you need, that will bring in more legislative support as well. That is what they are looking for. That is where they think we have not met the expectations for the state on the whole. We have, again, pockets of excellence, but have fallen short in some areas. So, again, this sets it up to really be a model of innovation in a way that legislators have clearly communicated will drive funding decisions.
Mahalo. Here's another pre-submitted question. As a UH West Oʻahu student and community member, I'm concerned about how the proposed leadership changes might impact our campus's academic programs, student support services, and overall identity. How will these changes ensure that UH West Oʻahu maintains its academic autonomy, keeps student voices central in decision-making, and continues to fulfill its unique mission of serving the needs of our local and Native Hawaiian communities while remaining accessible and community-focused?
I will share. And if you look at both institutions' missions and core values, we have very many similarities. We serve the same students. We serve the same community. We have very similar core values, access and affordability, and our Native Hawaiian values. All of these are core to both institutions. I think from a student perspective, students should not and will very unlikely feel anything other than positive and amazing opportunities. And the reason that I say that is because we're centering most of these decisions, if not all of them, on that student experience. And as to the uniqueness that both campuses represent, that's something that we'll continue to reflect on. I'll give you one example on that. We have our Waianae Moku Education Center, and then we have our Pu'uloa campus in Pearl City. And I will tell you that both cultures are very different and both celebrated. Both celebrated because they are a reflection of who we are and who our students are. And that is something that we will continue to celebrate. We don't want to force a change that's going to have a detrimental effect. And that's an example where you could see it live. If you were to walk our Waianae Moku Education Center today and walk on our Pu'uloa campus, you would feel a difference. And they're both good.
Mahalo nui, Carlos. And, due to the volume of questions, it appears we're going to extend the forum by about 10 minutes. And I know both of you wanted to take this opportunity to be transparent, but also to have a collaborative conversation. So we, again, mahalo all of our in-person audience as well as virtual audience for submitting your mana'o. Any in-person questions on that note that we can help address right here in the front? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Robin Tasaka. I direct the Noel Center, which is the learning center here. My question is, what can we kind of expect in January? Maybe like first steps kind of thing?
That's a great question. I will tell you that I will continue to engage between now and January in informal and formal settings just to learn a lot more. But I don't think that you should expect much of any change come January, other than that I will be the interim chancellor. I will tell you that I will be engaging with groups to form a task force that is inclusive of representatives from, faculty, staff, and even from both campuses to explore. But that's not going to happen that fast, always. And the opportunities that we'll be able to bring forward are not going to happen immediately come January. This will take some time, and there will be some opportunities for us to engage so that I can learn best and that we can collectively define that future. But a lot of it will be additional engagements and opportunities to bring people together that will help inform our future. And so that's what you could expect early on.
Mahalo, Chancellor. And we have heard you say that this is an evolving conversation, but we are getting some specific questions, and we want to make sure that we express that as well. This one coming in from Zoom, reading for the interim chancellor. You note dual enrollment and early access in your slide. How will this apply specifically to UH West Oʻahu? Will you convert 9-month faculty to 11-month faculty in order to fulfill early college class requests?
So that's a little bit too specific. I haven't put any thought into that very specific situation, but open to discussions. I will say from a dual enrollment and early access, I'm seeing it a little bit more from the Leeward student being able to more organically be part of both campuses. Right now, we've always had the opportunity. Actually, when I come here to West Oʻahu, I bump into my students, and which is why I come to many of your commencements, because many of your students were my students, and that's how I thrive. That's how I am able to wake up every morning and still be, chipper for the day. It's celebrating our students' success. But when it comes to that dual enrollment and early access, it's really a matter of, are there programs where our students can apply to one and already be making progress to both, where they simply just continue and earn their bachelor's and not have to apply to become a UH West Oʻahu student? That is where I see a lot of opportunities. You know how many Leeward students come to UH West Oʻahu as transfer students? That is a very small slice of the total enrollment at Leeward. And I'm not even including my non-credit enrollment. And so if we could make it more organic, that is a real opportunity for both campuses. And so that's what I reflect on with early access and dual enrollment.
And just add, I actually saw that in action at my last institution, where they created that intersection of in business. When you matriculated at the community college, you were, so long as you met a certain set of thresholds, it was automatic continuance at the 4-year. And it wasn't just the fact that the continuance was there. It was that they were invited to the student clubs, to the speakers. And so it began an early engagement on campus of belonging and connection with the professors. Again, to create that feeling you belong here, and it's not actually, it's just a natural progression of what you've already decided, as opposed to a complete break and a recommitment to something new.
Mahalo, President Hensel. This next question, pre-submitted with regard to personnel needs. Will there be UH West Oʻahu employees who work for or at LCC and vice versa? Or will there be a mutual sharing of personnel between the two campuses depending on the individual needs of each?
I mean, I can answer part of this. I think across the system, we are asking the question of, where does it make sense to share services? Just again, we've got a 30% perennial lack of staffing. There are very uneven staffing across the system, and it's really unfair for staff, for example, who are the staff person in a particular area that's critical. If they go on vacation, if they're out sick a day, the whole world comes to an end. That's not good for the department. It's not good for the staff member. And so we're talking about, are there places where it really doesn't matter? We could have the lines come together. You can sit wherever you sit, but that there's backup and professional development opportunities and collaborative support to create that critical mass. And that's just the beginning of a conversation. The chancellors have indicated some interest across the system in having it, things like HR, things like finance, things that are, pretty standard across the system, but carried out in different places. Can we provide a better support network for those? So I just want to point out, this is not, what's happening here in this room is not in isolation for those other conversations. So I assume there will be some repercussions to that here as well. But
And
not hitting it specifically.
I will just reinforce that we already have some folks that walk on both sides, and not just Leeward West Oʻahu, but even other campuses, whatever that may be, in whichever space that may be in. But I will commit I will commit to supporting you as my employees, as part of this family, in the way that I've supported the Leeward folks all along. I will ask for additional resources. I will commit resources when necessary. But I do think that at some point it makes sense for certain offices to talk to each other and work together, so that when our students are going through advising, aren't getting two different stories. And that's where we need to be able to align a little bit more. But come January, nothing this proactive. But over time, there should be opportunities for us to cross-pollinate and collaborate to the benefit of our students. But I commit to working on getting the resources for UH West Oʻahu. I am becoming very, very well aware of the staffing needs here and how I need to work effectively to addressing that.
Thanks, Carlos. And we just have about 10 minutes left in the forum, and we want to extend the mahalo again for welcoming us to your campus on this Aloha Friday for this collaborative conversation and live stream forum. We're going to go ahead and scan the in-person audience to see if anyone has questions for leadership. We have one right here. Mahalo.
Thanks, folks. I'm Louis Herman, professor of political science, social science. I just want to say I really appreciate you folks, the way you have opened this meeting and created an environment where we can share in a sort of straightforward way. I was just wondering if you can give us any idea going forward what concrete steps could be taken to ensure this level of communication transparency and involving us in the process of decision-making and creative thinking as we move forward.
Yeah, I think once we get to the point where there is a plan of some kind, I mean, that's more concrete as opposed to, again, beginning the conversation, that will all be very public. You know, as I said, there's no intention, there's no benefit. Let me be clear. I mean, aside from the intention, it's just not, it doesn't work if we're not having these conversations and there isn't a level of engagement and excitement by this campus of moving towards something better as opposed to feeling something that's being imposed upon you. And so this is going to be a transparent process. I'm happy to come back regularly if our engagement needs to continue as the system representation. I know you're going to be there on a regular basis, but I would say, the one thing we did say that I don't think we've mentioned here is loosely thinking on a 2-year kind of time frame in terms of having conversations that by the end of 2 years, I think we should know whether there needs to be separate chancellors, whether we're going to have enough of a definitive structure on each side that we go ahead and formally put somebody in and do a search at UH West Oʻahu. So that's kind of the overarching time frame. And we will absolutely publish some type of clear set of conversations and decisions as we go in real time.
And I will just reinforce that, and you don't know this yet of me because I haven't been at UH West Oʻahu, but I do engage with our existing governance structures in a very formal and informal way. I engage every instance I have an opportunity to engage whenever I'm invited. Sometimes even if I'm not invited, I may try to get in. But it's really engaging with existing structures that the college has because we don't want to, not include our governance. We don't want to get folks to really provide that feedback that's necessary. But there will also be opportunities for us to form additional task forces that are defined around some of the opportunities we want to engage in. And so that will be also, the composition will be representative because we want the voice of folks at the table when we're thinking of ideas moving forward.
Mahalo. This next question from Zoom, and we're going to transition a little bit. It reads, creating a task force actually drains resources because your faculty are already stretched thin. What are some alternative measures or creative thinking that you can offer other than creating yet another committee structure? In other words, how do you intend to create a collaborative environment when we've begun on tense ground?
Well, it doesn't feel tense to me. I think any change brings with it a sense of concern and heightened awareness. And certainly that was communicated to me in the first instance by the Faculty Senate. But I understand you can say differently if you think so. But I thought when we walked out of that room, we made progress. And I think when we walk out of this room, we'll make progress, right? And that we'll move it along as it makes sense to move it. I don't know.
And I will just share that, again, being part of Leeward Community College, I too know that when we ask folks to do more, it's not always, that they have all the much more time to spare to engage. And we will have opportunities to provide resources. We're still trying to establish it, which is why for January, it won't likely be in place. But the idea too is to bring resources to the table and not to just take from the table.
Yeah, let me, that's never a good idea. It's always what it feels like though. Like what else are you going to keep on top of us? Look, this is the commitment that I can give you as the president for everything that I do, not just this. that we will set parameters to have a real conversation. It will be an engaged conversation, and there will be an end to the conversation. And we will make a decision, and we will move on that decision. You know, what I think where people get absolutely drained is where we talk ad nauseum. We allow sometimes one or two voices rather than the many voices to stall and obfuscate in some cases. And then we just say, well, I guess we can't come to an agreement. And it may be that we don't, right? But if there is a clear consensus that starts to emerge, the fact that not everybody agrees isn't a reason not to move forward if it's the right thing to do for our students. So, you know, I think it's just important to say there will be engagement and there will be an end to it. And we are not blazing a trail. Can I just say, we're not the first, we won't be the last. There are tremendous resources out there about things that are high impact practices. We are working with EAB. In fact, that's one very significant resource that I've already made available to Carlos, and they are consultants who can narrow in on high impact practices in exactly this context with those who have gone before us. So we can see what fits, what doesn't, what makes sense, and where we might want to start.
Mahalo nui, President. And due to our time constraints, we've arrived on our final question of the afternoon, pre-submitted to us ahead of the forum. How will integration affect student pathways, course availability, and faculty advising responsibilities? And what plans are in place to minimize disruption to academic progress?
That was a very long question, actually. I will say this much. Initially, not very much of impact because we're going to be defining where we're going to have these collaborations. But imagine as we make progress where our students don't have to wait out a semester to take that last class because maybe we didn't have enough enrollment, or maybe we just didn't have the class being offered. That alone is a major indicator for that student's success, because any stop out is just an opportunity to not come back. And so from an advising perspective, we already have advisors on both sides of the equation advising students on where to go to next. The collaboration will hopefully get a lot more streamlined, where either side could effectively advise our students without necessarily second guessing what may be the right advice. And so these are opportunities. And so again, come January, they're just opportunities to engage. We may create sandbox environments where we are working together, but any formal changes will take a little bit more time. But just go back to that student experience, being able to graduate on time or ahead of time, my goodness, and being able to have the course availability be a little bit more generous, and to be advised in a way in which they're able to progress through wherever they're at, whether at Leeward or West Oʻahu, are all major milestones of opportunity that we should engage in.
Mahalo, Carlos. And with that, we want to be sure to offer you both the opportunity to share any remarks you might have to close.
Yeah, I will just invite this campus, all of our campuses, to approach these conversations with curiosity. You know, that's who we are as academics working in a university, students studying here, staff who are furthering our academic mission. You know, I think it's such an easy moment in time to become very oppositional in the sense that, you know, whatever we do is the wrong thing and we move to our corners. I hope you can be excited by this as what is possible and who do we want to be as opposed to where are we at this particular moment. And in doing that, not be stymied by the question of what are the barriers in front of us, but if that we could get rid of them, what could we achieve together? And because again, you know, Carlos has heard me say this. I think the most profound moment of my adult life was when I realized that we just make stuff up. You know, as leaders, at some point, everything you see around us are just the product of decisions that somebody made at some point in time that this is the way that we should do it. As things change, as our students are affected differently by the world that we live in, let's make different choices and make better outcomes together. So appreciate your time and showing up today. Thank you so much.
And I appreciate that, President Hensel, and I will share again, thank you all for joining today. I'd say that on a Friday afternoon during the fall break for the DOE, it really shows a lot of commitment and engagement from the campus folks here at West Oʻahu. I am incredibly committed and thrilled to move into this space. I know that it won't come without its obstacles, but I am excited about the possibilities, especially when we have our students in mind. And our students are actually made, for many of you, maybe your own kids at some point, it may be you later on. It is really creating a new space for us in a place where both campuses, we are known to be very innovative. Imagine how synergistic it can be if we both innovate together and become this workhorse for UH, where a lot of opportunities become available. I commit to the engagement. I commit to the transparency. Invite me to your meetings and events should you want to. I am readily available to embrace and engage with everyone because I do think that this is a wonderful opportunity, however it may end. Even if it ends with 2 chancellors and 2 independent institutions, if we could at least make some meaningful alignments for our students, that is my net gain. And so with that, thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate the time, the questions, and the effort that you put into putting the questions together.
Para pa'i-pa'i makako, Chancellor Peñaloza, President Hensel. And before we wrap up, we just want to be sure to extend our mahalo, ha'aha'a to Chancellor Benham for welcoming us to the UH West Oʻahu campus for your aloha. We want to thank you all again for being here on Aloha Friday, asking your thoughtful question. A recording of today's forum will actually be posted soon on UH News. If you ever like to rewatch, revisit, or for those who weren't able to tune in. On that note, mahalo piha, UH West Oʻahu. We wish you a safe and restful weekend. Aloha.